Welcome. You're listening to Literacy Now, the official podcast for the nonprofit organization Parents for Reading Justice, and I am your host, Brett Tingley. Our guest today has lived in Naperville, Illinois for over 30 years and is a mother of 3. She's a dyslexia tutor for her daughter using the Barton Reading and Spelling Program. Jenine formed a parent group in Naperville, Illinois called Dyslexia Action Group Naperville, and they have advocated for dyslexia screening, teacher training, accommodations for students, and evidence-based reading intervention programs for students with dyslexia. Jenine and I also sit on the outreach committee of the Early Literacy Coalition Illinois together while they work to get literacy legislation passed in Illinois. Welcome to our podcast, Jenine Hanson.
Hi, it's great to be here. I'm thrilled to be sitting with my friend Brett and talking about what we do here in Naperville with our Dyslexia Action Group.
Well, it's such a powerful group, but before we talk about the actual group, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us about your background or your why, how you get into this work?
Just personally, we have 3 children. Our oldest daughter now is a sophomore. And we kind of have an interesting background. So my husband grew up in Naperville. I attended middle school and high school in Naperville, separate schools. It's a very large town with 2 huge school districts. Both school districts are top districts in the country. If you've never heard of Naperville, I don't know where you've been living because most people know it is consistently in the top 10, if not top 2 cities to raise a family in. Just a wonderful place in the Midwest. It started, by a river, the mighty DuPage River, clean water. And with that, the pioneers just were hard workers and they had great local schools. And that is why it's attracted so many people. The town is 130,000. My children go to Naperville School District 203, and the other school district is Indian Prairie 204. With that, they moved to Naperville for the town, for the schools, and for the park district. So that's why we're all here, and it really is supposed to be a world-class school school district. And we're both products of each of those school districts, and we both have college degrees, both in the business world, careers. And when it came time to leave Chicago, we moved to the suburbs to be close to family. Our oldest daughter started kindergarten, and we were thrilled to have her in a dual language immersion program. I don't have any Spanish language background other than a couple of years in middle school. My husband went to Miami of Ohio for college, and he has a minor in Spanish, and he did study overseas, and he had shared with me that he had dreamed in Spanish, and I just thought, what a wonderful gift to give your child, dual language, and the program here was fairly new, highly immersive, and the promise is by the end of the program, the student is taking the seal of biliteracy. And also, if they're taking AP classes, they would have that credit towards college. So with that, our daughter we had read to her before she was born and did all that early learning, early literacy. She was walking, talking, meeting all those early benchmarks right on the money. We have 2 other children. And so when our daughter Vivian entered kindergarten, half of her day was in Spanish and half of her day was in English. And was the time she was in maybe the end of 1st grade, she just was never taking flight in reading. We had thought it was because of the immersion program. And, fast forward to the end of 3rd grade, we had gotten her a tutor. And that she was always testing consistently in the bottom 12th percentile in reading. Not necessarily in math, but as the word problems became more of that, universal screeners, she was having a harder time. And she just never could get past, she was never on level in a leveled reader, ever. And we would be like, what does level P mean? You know, we didn't understand what that ABC book meant. And now we know what it is. We know it's guided reading. We know it's Lucy Calkins. We know it's Fontes Pinnell. And it did not work for her. So we had some tutoring for grade 3, grade 4, and in grade 5, you know, it's not working. Her tutor thinks she has something called dyslexia. You know, what is she talking about? And in grade 5, she had a teacher that listened a day one of school and said, I'm going to set up something called a domain meeting. And I was like, what does that mean? Which is important for parents to know because we're not familiar with this vocabulary of inside the school. And I thought, a domain meeting? Why doesn't she just say meeting to talk about my child's reading? So we had a domain meeting. It took a year to get an evaluation, to have that looked at. And eventually what happened with our daughter, she had to have a professional evaluation outside of school because the school didn't do the evaluation at first. And we had the means to figure it out. And I wasn't convinced it was dyslexia. I just didn't know enough about dyslexia. I thought it was this dual language. I found a bilingual neuropsychologist. Talk about type A. And I had a reading specialist in my neighborhood who was a dear friend tell me, your child's going to be fine. She's going to be fine. And at the same time, I had a school social worker at the neighboring district, the other Naperville district. Your daughter's going to be fine. You know, she's going to be fine. Don't put your daughter through this rigorous testing. We just did the academic testing. It was not rigorous. To be honest, we were a little surprised that the professionals and our friends were telling us it wasn't needed. The results came in very thorough that Vivian, our daughter, had dysphonetic dyslexia, and she had the deficit in memory recall, rapid naming. She had a 3rd grade reading level. This is the middle of 5th grade. And this is with private tutoring that wasn't really working. So that intervention she was getting through the private tutor wasn't working. And she had a 2nd grade encoding or spelling level. And she was going to go to middle school in just 6 months. And I always share with people, 6th grade science has a lot of vocabulary. And one of those words is, you know, a decodable word is sedimentary rock. And there's no way Vivian could read on her own. She'd never even learned the skill of using her finger to point. So it was a long process. It involved paying, you know, a lot of money out of pocket to get the diagnosis. It wasn't until we had that professional diagnosis that the school entertained evaluating her. And we did have an advocate. So cha-ching, cha-ching. We're racking up the money, but we would do anything for our child. And I do want to say that our pediatrician, when we were at the milestone visits and we had kept up with that, she did not know anything about dyslexia. And she had recommended, why don't you just stop doing the private tutoring and let your child fail? And then the school will have to. And I'm like, but she's in the 12th percentile. I had thought in my mind maybe the 25th or below percentile, you would receive some type of attention, monitoring. And she was our first kid, so we had no idea what we were doing. So I have learned so much on this journey, and that is my why. Because I moved here, because my husband grew up here, I grew up here, we wanted to raise our family in a world-class school district. And I thought it was unacceptable that they missed that this kid had the most common learning disability on the planet. So when you put it in that context, new parents, you expect this, you're paying to live here. The number one reason people move here are the schools, and the second would be the park district, so your kids can play all these different sports and become these well-rounded individuals. It was quite shocking. And then when I found my people, I found my other, that's, step one, I found this group called the Dyslexia Action Group in Naperville. It was founded by a pediatrician who had 3 children who all had dyslexia, and she had no formal training in dyslexia, the most common learning disability. And here she was constantly screening kids, every time she would do a well visit. So her name was Dr. Karen Kryling, and she was from the other school district in Naperville. We had another co-founder was Kathy Clarkin. She worked at Fermilab. So she was a science person. She had one child, and he had dyslexia, but it was never picked up and it wasn't attended to. And then we had another person from the finance world whose child had dyslexia in the other Naperville School District 204. So these founders founded this group. They knew to start hosting gatherings. So it was as simple as, we're going to host a coffee clatch is what they did. And they called Whole Foods Market. And Whole Foods in the middle of Naperville said, sure, you can use our cafe. You could use it once a month, twice a month. So they would have a morning coffee clatch once a month and an evening coffee clatch once a month. And they just started promoting that word of mouth and on Facebook. And that's where parents would go. And all it was at first was sitting around that table at Whole Foods, and you'd put your name and email on a piece of paper, and you'd get on their mailing list, and you'd share what had happened. My daughter was in the 12th percentile. She can't sound out any words. And the 15 people at the table would say, me too. Mm-hmm. And everyone was saying the same story over and over again. And then they would share resources, tutoring, or a neuropsychologist, or here's a letter. Here's how you advocate. Here's who you need to call at your school. Oh, I've had success with this person at this district. And that is really how it started. And it is true grassroots, and it is true community. Eventually, they were having an Ask the Expert come in, maybe 4 times a year. So they would get a bigger space to rent. So they would have a neuropsychologist come in and explain dyslexia. What's it look like in the brain? What are the different points that, for the reading to work? They had educational advocate come in and help define all these terms. What's the difference between an IEP? Do you really need an IEP? What's a 504? How do you do that? What happens in the IEP meeting? It shouldn't be adversarial at all. And I found out that our district actually has training for parents to come to the district. And then this is a career. This is a job you could have. This person would come in and teach the parents all this terminology, what happens in an IEP meeting, why the principal or vice principal is looking around and saying, do you agree? Do you agree? Do you agree? So I just went to everything I could and started building this knowledge base and started connecting with other parents. Our meetings grew. I went to several conferences that some organizations such as Everyone Reading Illinois hosted here. They hosted a parent conference. I was able to hear from experts at that with my husband. And it was at that conference he said, I think my brother has dyslexia. I mean, fast forward today, we know his dad has dyslexia. We know his 2 brothers have dyslexia, and our 3 nephews and our daughter have dyslexia. And we've been able to help our nephews who are younger. Our daughter's the oldest grandchild, and they live all over the country. One of them lives in Hong Kong, which is kind of interesting because over there, he's in 2nd grade. They called a meeting. The family came in, the student came in, the principal, and said, "We think your child has dyslexia. We've put together the IEP, this individual education program." And my brother-in-law and sister-in-law are like, "You're crazy, Jenine. Our school had this. They covered it." And I was like, "Yeah, that's how it should be." So it's so great for our youngest nephew that he's getting automatic identification in 2nd grade. And he's in a language immersion program. So that's my why. I do it because my family, obviously our daughter, but also it just was such a shock that the school district wasn't doing it already. And I didn't understand why.
Parents for Reading Justice is a nonprofit grassroots movement dedicated to ensuring every child learns to read by engaging parents and educators in adopting the science of teaching reading. Please watch our award-winning film, Our Dyslexic Children, take our master class, and to ensure all our services remain free of charge, please consider making a donation today, all at parentsforreadingjustice.org. Wow, and that's what's so interesting to me and why I love doing this podcast is because I like to talk to the parents who figure out what's going on, help their own child, but then it's just like that gnawing feeling. This is such an injustice. It's terrible that this goes on when we really do know how to teach dyslexic children and really all kids how to read. So what I love is talking to parents who don't just stop when their own kid is okay, who keep going and keep fighting. Can you tell us about how, so the group initially came together almost as a parent support group to support one another, but then you became more of an advocacy group that began to help the district change its ways, change its system, come to the science of reading. How did you transition?
We did. And, this is my 5th year leading the district advocacy efforts in Naperville School District 203. When I got involved, Naperville's so big. So we had wanted to do coffee klatch meetings just with parents in our school district because things were a little bit different. They had different systems, they had different tests, different screeners, not too different, but slightly different. And then they had different, obviously, administrators, point people to talk to. So we had started hosting just meetings for parents in District 203. And I had started championing those meetings. I wanted to find the people. We have 14 elementary schools. I think we have 5 middle schools and 2 high schools in District 203. And so I just started hosting the district meetings, and they had some progress with the superintendent of student services. So they had met with her and shared their frustration, and just so happens there was about 20 parents out of one elementary school. And what we uncovered was they had this reading intervention program called Wilson Reading. And some kids in the district were getting it, and some kids weren't, and some schools were. And what was happening, it was being phased out. And parents were very frustrated that they were being denied this Wilson program. Even teachers had said the district has trained me in this for years, but it was expensive and to keep up. So that had been phased out. So we started meeting. Before I was involved, the district had a teacher and parent meeting, and they brought in the dyslexia parents with the reading specialists and learning behavior specialists, the special ed people, elementary, middle, high school, and it just got ugly really fast. People are very emotional. And I think the difference for me was, by the time I got involved and took over as the parent liaison, I had already been tutoring my daughter. Mm-hmm. She had already gotten her IEP. She was getting minutes in school for decoding. She was getting 90 minutes at home with the Barton Reading and Spelling Program, and it was delivered by me. I had a mentor who could help me with that program and questions if we got stuck. So I was really understanding what my daughter needed to be successful. And I wasn't worried about her because I could see the progress, and you could see it on her face, and you could see it in the testing, and she was advocating for herself. All these great things. Everything you want to happen was happening. And so when you can kind of remove yourself from that emotion, you can have a real conversation, and you could be stoic, and you could be professional, and you can sit across from somebody and just ask why. Why are you making these changes? Why don't you have this intervention program that's evidence-based? Well, what are you doing? What happened to phonics? Do you guys teach phonics? So we went in there, and to get that meeting and to restart and get we got a dyslexia task force with the school district. But to do that, you had to talk to the school board. My group had never done it. These people are very worried about retaliation. I was never worried about that. I think a lot of people really burn bridges, get emotional, and lose it. And they're scared. Or they don't have it. They don't have the money to go to another school. They don't know what to do. So they're very scared. Once my group decided enough is enough, we have this person who wants to talk on behalf of the group. That's key. You gotta do it together. If you're just one of you, and you can do it in a professional way, just like your business experience, if you have a business background or something like that. So we wrote. We did it around October, Dyslexia Awareness Month. So if anyone's like, I don't know when to go or what to do, we did it in October. And my group has done this wonderful program. We do it every October at the public library. It's called the Dyslexia Simulation. And the public is invited. Our partners from Everyone Reading Illinois, we're not the experts, we're the parents. Our partners come in and they run a dyslexia simulation. There's 5 different stations. Everybody rotates through the stations. You learn about dyslexia. You learn about the intervention programs. It's highly educational, informative. It's delivered by the experts. And then you get to experience what a person with dyslexia would experience. And when that happens, the empathy from a parent for that child, or maybe a teacher for their student, or a board member who has a business background, who just wants to be there and make the right financial decisions for the school board on behalf of the school. When they're at that simulation, they really step back and take a breath and realize, I had no idea this is what it was like to have dyslexia or dysgraphia. So you can look into sources like International Dyslexia, and you can get trained and learn how to do. There's different types of simulations, and what was really great about this one is, you're mentally challenged. You're trying to decode, and then the person is saying, do it faster, Johnny. Come on, read louder. I can't hear you. So you're trying to do this decoding skill, and you just learned this code, but then you also have to do it quickly and not read in a robot voice. That's just one station. And then you've got another one simulating hearing with headphones, and you can't quite hear. There's another one where you're writing in your non-dominant hand, looking in a mirror. And so, I always have cookies at this, because people after two sessions are like, I need a cookie. They need to stress eat or something. So that's one of my things. I like to make it fun, because a lot of these sessions are heavy and there's like a lot of emotions. So anyway, we needed to get the school board's attention, and we wanted to include them in our simulation. So we happened to have a friend who was in the PR business, and she was able to get a story, and I got to be in the local paper just about Dyslexia Awareness Month. October is Dyslexia Awareness Month. Almost every local paper is doing a feature like that in October, so people could take this and use this. And then we were featured in the local paper in early October, and then we went and spoke at the board meeting, and we got 5 minutes because you're speaking for a group. Mm-hmm. And at the time, we didn't have our lovely green t-shirts that say Dyslexia Action Group in Naperville, but we had some students that had made some, and we had over 40 people come, which was a big deal pre-COVID to have that many people at a board meeting. Mm-hmm. We were told not to come, that by a school board member had advised one of our parents, it's not the right setting. They're not going to be prepared to listen. And I was confused by that. There might have been, to that school board member's, credit, they had the parent group speaking not to arm the teachers with weapons in school. Our district was never going to vote to arm the teachers. So I was like, oh, this will be great, because then they'll all be there. And then the newspaper and the TV people will be there. And that's exactly what happened. So they went and they spoke. And then the proponents and opponents of that were there. I got to meet the teacher union president, and I spoke. And all I did I defined what dyslexia was, dispelled some myths, highlighted it's the most common learning disability, noted that we're not screening for it, that our Illinois State School Board has a handbook about dyslexia that we could be using. We asked them to, put all resources towards, screening, teacher training, and looking at a new intervention program. So it was like 3 asks. And then we invited them, the school board members and the administrators, to please come to our simulation in 10 days. And we had a huge turnout. We had over 100 people come to the simulation. In Naperville Public Library, we have 3 public libraries. And we had the space. It was a phenomenal turnout. We had 3 board members. At the time, we had 2 superintendents, administrators come. And then we had the student services team members that worked at the building administration. They came too. I had instructed my whole elementary school, please come here. You have to reach out to your teachers. And so we had a great, great turnout. And I can remember we had the local cable TV guy came and did an interview. So then you have that little nugget of press that you could put out, maybe 20 people will see it, but it really was empowering leaving the board meeting. That was so positive. We said what we wanted. I remember taking a picture with the parents outside. I remember one of my family members saying, look how happy everybody is. It just felt like the right thing to do. And it wasn't shouting or it wasn't anything like that. And then they came to the simulation, and then the superintendent of student services, she formed, we had a couple meetings. We formed this task force. But this time we kept the parents met separately, and her teachers through the different schools met separately. So what was happening, the purpose of the task force was what do the parents want to change? And at the time, we were asking for screening. And we were bringing in our resources. Have you ever heard of the predictive assessment of reading, the PAR? And it screens for these 5 areas that would tell you that your child's at risk of dyslexia. Not of having, it's not a diagnosis, but at risk. So they had agreed to use that and pilot that. So she had put that into play. So this was a year long. But over the course of the year, we looked at screening. Check, got that. And then the teachers were doing a case study, and they were looking at all of their resources. They like to call it resources, and I like to call it reading programs. So they were looking at all their different reading programs, and they had used the New Jersey handbook, dyslexia handbook, because they were going to go through all of their resources and see if they followed the structured literacy approach. And they did that. And then they were going to find out where the gap analysis led them, and if they needed to source a new intervention program. That's what they did. So the parents gave input onto, hey, I've had success with this program called Take Flight. I've had success with the Barton Reading and Spelling program. I've had success with Linda Mood Bell. I've had success with Wilson, Spire. So the parents, we had about not quite 20 parents, and we were smart. We had a diverse group of parents, and we were bringing those recommendations in, and they ended up choosing something called Spire, which is research based. And it was affordable, and they could deliver it through this large school district. So that's where they landed with that. And it was going to be used K through 12. And it does follow the right progressions. It had decodable passages. It only, you had to start at level 1, all of these great things. It had an online component, but they were going to use the handwritten materials. And then there was the professional learning. That was really our third major ask. So we don't feel like these administrators who are running the IEP meetings know the current definition of dyslexia. So we need an institute day on dyslexia. I mean, can you imagine if your school did a dyslexia institute day just about what is dyslexia? It's not just flipping letters. It's, phonological awareness. It's, rapid naming and memory gap, right? And so we wanted an institute day. But what they came up with, because what you learn is once you start sitting down with your district or a big district, it's like to put together that professional learning calendar is months, if not a year and a half in advance. And it has to do with when they're delivering assessments, what's mandated by your state, all of these different things. But you won't learn that if you're not sitting across the table, if you're not going to the school board meetings. You have to start to plug in. You have to be open. You have to take it all in so that it makes sense to you. And so you could try to get in on the calendar. So they came up with the solution for professional learning through the Institute of Multisensory Education at IMSE. And that's out of Indiana. I mean, phenomenal, right? So they had contracted with them for a dyslexia module. So like maybe just the social worker or an admin could, even at the administration level, could take this online course. And then for the reading specialists, they had a deeper dyslexia module. It was a 30-hour course. So they had 2 30-hour courses leading into getting Orton Gillingham trained. And that's what's happening now. Our reading specialists are getting Orton Gillingham trained. They're loving it because it's an expensive class to take. They can add it to their resume. They get to keep all of the materials, which are amazing, handbooks, scripts, examples. It's really manipulatives. It's really, really thorough. There's people it's an online course. There's people on the course. So it's a 30-hour course, but there's people on there from Italy, Japan. There's people all over. And the Naperville teachers, there's been over 400 teachers who've taken this coursework, and some of them have taken multiple courses. And you can really tell from the parents that, oh, my child's primary or my child's reading teacher says dyslexia. They know what it means. They want to do this intervention program. They know they learned how to look at the right data. That was a big gap that we found. So many moving parts of this discovery session. So they implemented this professional learning, right? And it was optional. So I was like, optional? No, that's not good enough. What do you mean optional? But wow, it's over 400 teachers have taken it. You can only take so many students at a time to do these modules, and there's always a wait list. I recently connected with elementary school and middle school shared school psychologist who took the Orton Gillingham training. I mean, bravo. These people, bless him, right? And he learned so much, and so did his cat. He posted this picture of his cat and him taking this course. I just had to add that in there because I'll never forget that. But this guy's a veteran school psychologist, and he wants to do a better job of evaluating the students. And he really wants to understand what, if they're testing weak here in the encoding, what does that mean? He knows that they could have a high IQ, but the deficit is somewhere else. So this is all very, very good. And the last thing out of our task force was this accommodation matrix. So there's hundreds of accommodations that you can look at. But I mean, there's no way your child, or the teachers could ever manage that many accommodations, right? So what I like about the matrix that they put together is it asks a series of questions based on the need or the area of deficit. So then you could plug in the different accommodation. So like my daughter, she had a lot of trouble reading grade level text because she wasn't at grade level reading. So she had audiobooks. Everything on the Chromebook was speech to text, text to speech. Every textbook, she could access. She had the Speechify app. She had, every tech thing that you could want or was recommended, this district was like, we got it. We'll put it on there. We'll teach your kid how to use it. If she had to take a test and have someone read the questions out loud, she had that. And of course, extra time. She's on a 504, 10th grade now. And I'll tell you what, she just really needs about 3 accommodations. 3. You got to hold on tight to those when they get to high school, though. That's a whole nother podcast. High school. But what I found out is this matrix, and this is such a great resource. It's on our district website.
And send it to us, and we'll include it in the show notes because, we're trying to get all this really good information out to parents. So we'd be happy to put it in our show notes, a link.
Okay. Yeah, it's on our district website. And what I found was that sometimes the districts as big as ours, it's the rollout of resources. It's not what you would experience maybe from the business world. If you're going to roll out a new product or a new tool, I have a mortgage background. Like, you're going to know about that product because you're going to want to sell that product, right? And you're going to want to make money on it. So I was in marketing in that channel. So the districts are doing, they're doing their best to roll these things out. So I just rolled it out to my elementary school. I roll every time my daughter has a new series of teachers, I send a nice email, include the links that are resources that their bosses made. And every semester, a teacher says, I didn't know we had this. This is great. And that's 5 years now. So crazy. So we had all this going. I got to present to the teachers the parent feedback on programs, on accommodations. And it really took the adversarialness and the uncomfortableness away from the situation. And then it built trust with the staff and then trust with the parents, because I could go back to them and say, oh, I sat in on this meeting. They are identifying that they don't have a resource that follows structured literacy. So then COVID happened. And we were meeting to look at data on the dyslexia screener they were piloting. So that kind of put a pause into the advocacy. And our group had decided not to lean in on them and let them get through the initial months of the pandemic. And, we were all like teaching our kids at home. So here we are today. And, we're this past spring, you may have noticed a lot of educational conferences are in full swing in February and March. Professional learning is like a blaze everywhere, right? And I'm so excited to say and share that, my school district hosted professional learning, and they did it all on the science of reading, and their main book was Shifting the Balance. And so I have photographs from that professional learning of those teachers in that session. It looks like there's 100 teachers in there, maybe more. And they're talking about the science of reading. They're talking about the shift. They're talking about it, and they're learning about it. And then they're going to go back and teach their teams. So that's something where they're really big on here is train the trainer.
Yes.
I would not prefer that for like training someone on an intensive reading intervention program. But, I've got to accept that that's how it's done here. So that was such a huge prideful moment. It wasn't just because of me. It was, a lot of moving parts. And my district, they did list the administrators. They listened to Soul to Story podcast. We had dialogue about how they teach reading. We had dialogue about, are you still doing 3Qing? We had dialogue about their resources. During COVID, my district approved $250,000 in a phonics curriculum, a phonics program by Benchmark. And it's written by a man called Wiley Blevins. Maybe you've heard of him. It's a K through 5 phonics workbook program. It's in English and Spanish. It's for all 14 elementary schools. And they rolled that out last year. So the school year last year. So now, we have Illinois, for those of you who didn't know, it was locked down a very long time. School this year is much more normal than any other year, and parents were welcomed inside schools for open houses. And it's been a long time interfacing with people in person, and it really makes a huge difference. And when those elementary teachers were like, oh, Mrs. Hanson, how are you? And I'm using this phonics book now that I have this curriculum. Oh, show me the books. It really feels good. It's really interesting because there's several issues with it. Is everybody using it? No. And so that's something we can always do better on. Another thing is when we were having our task force, we were told by the superintendent of student services, that when Common Core came in, phonics was put by the wayside. Those were her words. So I think that that's why they didn't have explicit phonics. Now, it doesn't mean teachers weren't doing it, because she used to always say to us, it's the art of teaching. If you're teaching kindergarten and you want to do jolly phonics, we've got it. So if you can imagine this closet of like expensive, big brand, resources, but not everybody knows about them. Maybe they have never seen them in action and they haven't been properly trained. Like, we have Haggerty phonics in our district. And I'm like, wouldn't that be a dream if everybody used Haggerty, right? So lots of good stuff that has come out of this small group. And what we had to do was really connect with the school board members. Once they came to that simulation, one of the school board members came up and said, you have to bring me something to approve. And that eventually was the phonics program, was the intervention program, was the professional learning. I didn't bring it to her. I just advocated for it. And then it really was the people, although they did let the parents, provide our wish list, I guess. They let us have input. It was effective. There's plenty of room to grow. We have something called NWEA MAP Growth, which is a very common universal screener that's delivered 3 times a year. It measures math and reading proficiency, grades K through 8. We're piloting the MAP dyslexia screener. It screens for those areas, those components that you want: vocabulary, naming recall, phonemic awareness, letter naming. I can't think of everything off the top of my head, but I have a meeting scheduled at the end of the school year, late May, early June, where that superintendent of assessment wants to sit down together and he wants to go through that pilot data with me. I mean, that's a huge thing. My other school district in Naperville, there's no relationship with the parents right now. There's no meetings about just dyslexia. Who knows what they're doing over there? But you need to find your people, and you need to meet at your kitchen table or at your Whole Foods. It doesn't have to be formal. And if you can find common ground and identify what everybody needs, you got to do it. You got to do it. It's paying off, not for my daughter, but in my neighborhood alone, I've helped 52 families in 5 years figure out how to help their kid who had dyslexia. So that keeps me going. And I just keep learning more about legislation and how Illinois is so far behind, and we need to train our teachers that are going to be future educators. So I'm a lot like you, Brett. Once you bite off and you get a taste and you make some positive impact and you learn more, and there's just so much room to grow.
And so many kids to help. And it's we know how to teach dyslexic kids how to read. The interesting thing to me is that each of the parent groups has its own kind of talent pool. And I love that you have this marketing bent and that you're at a pediatrician. You just kind of take who you have, but different groups might go in a different direction or have a different strength depending on who their members were. And I think that your marketing and your business savvy have really paid off well.
Thank you. It was that of the pediatrician, who was someone who was trained in evidence-based medicine, right? And so she wanted evidence-based intervention. And then our other member who had a science background, who was always looking at data. And in marketing, you're looking at data and then you're testing and you're shifting and you're, modifying that campaign. So I have met a lot of people, and the hardest part about this is that people's children, they age out. They age out. Eventually your kid's going off to college, or they're doing what they're doing. That's really hard when they age out.
But you can be an advisory board member. I'm never going to stop working in my district because we've got the history. We're the ones who know
Right.
who knows what it was like and know how bad it was and why the work that we're doing is important. And the children who have overdosed or committed suicide. So the stakes are so incredibly high. We have that history. So we don't ever age out. We just go on the advisory board.
But that is something that's a challenge for me is with COVID, people either they got burnout or they aged out.
Yeah.
So I was rebuilding a little bit last year, and some of those people I'm still friends with. I never would have met them. I mean, I'm a swimmer. I swim. I run the swim team. Like, I'm always like, let's have fun. Let's go to the swim meet. I would never have met some of the people that made this happen. It really was a team effort. It really was a group of parents who all felt we should be screening this. It's really pretty simple. We should be looking for this. We should be treating this. And we should do it before they're in middle school.
And here's something that I like to remind parents. We shouldn't it's not that we should be doing it as if it's just a nice thing. Federal law, IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Acts, requires that public school districts, they have an affirmative obligation to find children with dyslexia. And so it's not just a nice should so that we can help kids access their future. It is in violation of federal law if you are not affirmatively looking for kids with dyslexia.
And it's not happening.
Yes, and that's why you and I have lots more work to do. The other thing I find fascinating is that you really leveraged the relationship with the school board. Because we found, we were all a little nervous. You're talking to the school board member, and come to find out, they don't know anything about it. And you're actually helping them to be more effective at their job. And we have a dyslexia task force where we meet with the highest levels of the district and our kind of exec board. And it is the parents who are professional, whose children are okay so that they can have these civil conversations. And we're working for the benefit of all children. There's no craziness. So I agree. But getting the school board involved, they're the only check on the district that we have. And we hire them. We do a meet the candidate night every election cycle so that they get to know what we're doing. We get to meet them. We get to figure out if we want to vote for them. And if nothing else, they look up dyslexia. They look up the Upper Arlington Kids Identified with Dyslexia Parent Group. And we talk to them about what our issues are.
Oh, that's such a great idea, doing a candidate forum, because we're having a local election April 4th in Naperville. And, I reach out to the people who are running. The incumbents know me. And it's a really smart thing to do, just so, like, as you mentioned, at least they'll look into dyslexia and look on your website. Because I'll never forget, I did this fundraiser at my elementary school. It was a toy resale. My gosh. You could sell your kids' toys and get 40% of the price, and then the other 60% went to the school. This was a job, and I got to know the principal really well. I never forget her telling me, and we were counting the cash of this fundraiser. She had said, "You get it." She told me two things. You get it. There's families that are identified that don't want to receive the intervention, which blows my mind. And then she did say, I have school board members come into the building, my elementary school, and they do a tour or they observe, but they really don't know what's happening at that level at the school. What is guided reading? What is an intervention program? So if you're a school board member and you're listening to this, have you been to an intervention? Have you sat in on that? Have you asked to sit on it? There's Louise Deshevitz was a school board member that I've gotten to know out of Illinois, and she gets it. So she was really making a difference in her local board. And I felt like my group didn't want it. They were scared. People are afraid to talk to the school board. Being in business, it's like not a non-issue. Like, you're just going to ask if you can have a meeting with somebody. So you need to find those kind of people who can handle that. And then they wanted to help. They really wanted to help. I'll never forget, there was a school board member, and we had gone to several different focus groups together, and he just could not believe that we didn't know about this. And after a year and a half, he came over to me and just shook my hand and said, I believe this is an issue. Thank you. And very short, totally different personality than me. And I had won him over. And I thought, he wants to learn. He knows, he recognizes this and he was a data guy. So you have to reach out to them. There's more than one. If you could just get one or two, I used to say, when they would show up at our events, say, who drew the short stick, and had to come. But it really is. That's why those people are on the board. They're community people. They're not getting paid to do it. They want to be better. So you gotta get to know them. We're hosting a big movie night next month. The Truth About Reading. And you bet your biscuit, we're going to invite every school board member. It's important they come. It's going to be fun, a different type of event. It's educational. It's awareness. It's not dyslexia, focus, but it's this how we're teaching kids how to read. And we know, the dyslexia moms know, that the kids with dyslexia can learn to read through the science of reading, tier 1, and they need to shift now or never. It's been 30 years of nothing, no change. So I'm so excited whenever I do my events. I try to make them fun, welcoming. And if you can get 2 or 3 people to change their mind or just listen, it's worth it. It's really worth it.
Absolutely. Let me ask you another question. To me, there's great utility once you have flipped your school district and they buy into the science of reading. And, I'm sending Sold a Story, Emily Hamford's documentary, to the school board members and to the administration. So we have a very high level of trust. And it's not perfect, but you always continuously improve. One of the things we're looking at now is we spend a lot on professional development. And teachers are coming into the district not knowing about dyslexia, not knowing about structured literacy, science of reading. We are going to go to some local colleges of education and provide customer feedback. My thought being, I could take Louisa Motzen, and she's a PhD, and she could say, you shouldn't do that. And they would say, well, our PhD says we should do that. But if I go in and I say, I'm not saying it. It's the school districts. I'm just facilitating this meeting. The school districts will say, we're not using the programs that you're promoting. We're not hiring from you nearly as much as we used to. We're spending way too much money on professional development once these people hit our schools because they're not prepared. And we might not even let your student teachers come in. To me, the teacher prep programs, that's the root of the problem. Do you have that kind of trust with your district where you could go in and talk to teacher prep programs?
So I don't have that. I haven't gone into that arena yet. But through the new legislation that's being proposed in Illinois, which would require the Illinois colleges of education to train future educators in the science of reading and structured literacy. because they don't require that in Illinois. And, there's 28, 30 other states that are requiring that. And we have a teacher shortage in Illinois, everywhere it does. My school district voted yes for that. So when they sent their delegate to the Illinois Association of School Board meeting, they sent them with yes, we vote yes, we want the colleges of education to provide that teacher prep in the science of reading and the structured literacy. And my whole thing is, you got to empower these teachers, these new educators. So we don't have that at the state level yet. That's going to take a long time. If it gets approved tomorrow, imagine that curve of that happening. You'll learn this. It takes like a couple of years for the changes to, come through. But I would agree with you that it's costing the district money. It's costing the families money. And it's damaging that kid, the children, forever. And we know through science and evidence, we know through Dr. Nadine Gabb, we know if you identify early and you intervene and you treat early, you're better off. It's like screening for breast cancer. So I haven't gone in that route. I know the Reading League is very active, and I think they just put out a new program where they would actually come to your college and look at what you're doing and be your consultant on that. So with that, I'm not the expert, but I can find the resources that could help that college or that could educate that college. So that's where I'm comfortable in that seat. I'll get the resource there. I'll sponsor a breakfast. I'll bring that together.
But the way to get the College of Education interested in that is, in my, because my background is engineering and business. So I look at it as a system, and they have a product. They are a business with a product. And if we're not buying what they're selling, or if there's an improvement, we are having a new Intel chip production facility here in Columbus. And they came in and spoke to the local colleges and said, we need this kind of student for you to graduate so that they can work in our company. School districts who have switched to the science of reading need to go into their colleges of education, that they're buying students, they're graduating all these students and hiring them, and they need to say, just like Intel would say, we need you to educate these students, these teachers, and help them understand how kids actually learn to read, so that we don't have to keep re-educating them. Correct.
And our district is trying to do a lot with new educators, new educator breakfast, new educator support throughout the year. So they're there. I don't know if anyone's brought this opportunity or this point of view to my district. So that's something that, I'm always learning new stuff. So it's really exciting that there's always room to go one step further and start that conversation.
Well, and you're reminding me about the dyslexia simulation, because we used to do that a lot, but I think there's some benefit to doing it now. And so I love these conversations because I learn stuff, you learn stuff, hopefully our audience learns a lot. So we can't thank you enough. And I know that you've got, that we're running to the end of our time, but before we close, I do like to ask our guests if there's anything they'd like to leave with parents before we conclude.
I guess, it's very similar for all the parents when they're first finding out, is you're not alone. You need to find the dyslexia parent group in your school, in your district, or maybe the neighboring suburb. You need to find the conferences so that you can learn. And you have to get your child help now. you need to tell your child that they have dyslexia. I've seen people not want to share that with their child. And it's really, the stigma really is still there. It's easy for some people to accept a diagnosis or to accept that the child has the learning disability. And I've seen other families where they didn't want to upset the child for whatever reason. And if anyone's out there and they haven't told their child, you've got to tell them. You've got to tell them. It's recognized by, American Disabilities. It doesn't go away. There's amazing accommodations that can follow you through, work, through college. I know so many kids that once they found out, they were like, I'm not dumb. That's the common quote. I mean, that's heartbreaking. Yes. My own child said that. She had 2 younger siblings that took flight and reading, very young, and for her to understand why her brain worked different and it wasn't her fault and she's not dumb. Yeah. You really need to engage your child and the outcome will be they'll put in the work. It's years of remediation. It's not a couple weeks at school. It's a couple years. It could be a couple years. And you want them to be independent and confident. And that's really why I believe in what I'm doing, because that's the outcome with our daughter. She's happy, she's confident, and she's able to do her work.
Sounds perfect.
It's that simple.
Well, thank you so much.
But it's not simple for everyone. You're welcome. It had a pleasure, always a pleasure talking with you, and I appreciate your time and learning from you. Always out there highlighting dyslexia and the science of reading. Your work is very important and so inspirational to the troops on the ground.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And we will talk to you very soon. Literacy Now is a podcast designed specifically for parents in our effort to ensure every child learns to read. Parents deserve a seat at the table, and we bring their voices to the fore. We invite you to join the Parents for Reading Justice community on all of our socials, and make sure to visit our website to watch our documentary and to take our masterclass. All of our content is free of charge because every child deserves to learn to read. This episode was brought to you by parentsforreadingjustice.org, produced by Brett Tingley and Keita Mascaro.